Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jing, and we're gonna learn about the ORCA tool. It's pretty new, and what it does, it assesses the security posture for your Office 365 environment, right? And making sure you have everything properly configured. So within about, I would say 5, maybe 10 minutes, you're gonna have a report from this tool to give you everything you need to understand if you have everything configured right. All right. So I'm going to go over this. I actually made a PowerShell script to make it easier to install and load up the tool and get the report more quicker. So it could be even a couple minutes depending on how well I made this script. So hopefully let me know if it works or not, and I'll fix it. But yeah, let's get started. So you don't have to clone this GitHub repository. You can actually just run install module ORCA. It's already located in the public repo that you can actually just install module ORCA, and you can install it and then run git ORCA report. But it's not that simple because you do have to connect to Exchange Online and then run. Now, what does it mean by connecting to Exchange Online? Well, if you've ever messed with PowerShell script with Exchange Online, is a tricky way, or kind of a certain way you have to do it. You connect to Exchange Online via PowerShell, called like a remote PowerShell session, and then you ingest a ton of commands that now you have the ability to use with the credentials you provide, if that makes sense. So you connect to this PowerShell environment, you authenticate, and then you're given commands to run within this remote environment. So it uses PowerShell session, right? It also requires you to enable WinRM and stuff like that. And hopefully my script will do that, but we'll see. So this is the ORCA tool. I'm going to flip over to my PowerShell script. I'm going to go over it real quick and have you look at it. Let's see here. Let me actually zoom in real quick so I can make it a little. All right, so we have a function, and I'll go into the function, go over the function real quick. So what is my tool doing? I'm going to explain this so you don't think I'm trying to, hack you or anything. But the dependencies, PowerShell Get, Exchange Online Management, and ORCA. You're downloading this from the, from the public repository. I do a for loop, right? And I say for each of these modules, find out if it's installed. If it's not installed, install it, and then update the modules. And then I get the modules. I print out a list for you to see the modules are installed. Then I check, is WinRM running, by getting the service and checking the status. Is it running status? If it's not running, which is NE, not equals to running, we want to enable PS remoting. And that is the command to enable WinRM. You may or may not be able to get it working with this command. You may just have weird things in your machine that, or configurations that maybe is outside of what I would know to troubleshoot it. But this is the link right here to check it out and see what's wrong. But if you get here and it flows through and it continues to be running, then the function runs. Flip back over to the function. The function runs. We will then, you can provide a UPN. You can actually copy and paste this and actually use it to connect to your, remote into your Exchange environment and then run other commands. There's a lot of commands you can run if you go to this site and within the Exchange environment and, mess with the mailboxes or get a lot of data through PowerShell. You can actually copy this function and use it. Right host, foreground yellow. So we're going to check if Office 365 is authenticated. And then if it is, if there's already a session that exists, that means that, is there a session already? Then say session exists and we get out of the function. And then we continue on to running the report. But if a session does not exist, that means else, we want to go ahead and build that session. It's going to require you to authenticate. Okay. Now, let me show you what this looks like. So let me actually remove some modules. So let's let me do this. Remove module name. Let's remove ORCA. Okay, and let me see if I have a PowerShell session still residing. I do, so let's remove that. So I can pipe it, remove PS session. Right? Now, let's run the script. Oh, wrong one. I'm going to my repository. Give me 1 second. Let me get there. Okay. All right, there it is. So we run the script. It's going to get the PowerShell. It's going to update it. It's going to check if Exchange Online Management is installed. Update it. ORCA is not installed because you saw me delete it. It'll install it. Once it installs it, it authenticates, and when it authenticates, you type Jing at. Oh, you don't type Jing. I type Jing. You type whatever it is to authenticate to your Office 365 environment, and make sure you have the right privileges, right? And again, if you saw that, it was ingesting all those commands that you have access to, which now ORCA can do its thing. So ORCA's going to do its thing. It's going to get all the settings and all the parameters. It does it very fast, and then boom. Thanks to the product group, they even made a HTML file you can navigate, right? So here it says informational recommendation and okay. So recommendations are things that you should change. Okay is things that looks good, right? So and then this is kind of grouping it up within all the respective areas. So we're going to go over each one. So if you want to continue further, I'm going to explain kind of all these components so you have an understanding. If you already have a good understanding, you just want to vet you want to have a baseline, then yeah, you can just stop watching this video. But if you want to continue on further and want me to explain all the components, I'm going to do my best to do that for you. So domain whitelisting, what does that mean? That means that usually domains are usually not whitelisted, but when you migrate from an on-premise Exchange environment to in the cloud and you're leveraging Exchange Online, we may absorb a lot of those whitelisting policies and configurations that reside on premise. The reason you still are able to achieve a high level or good security posture, if you're migrating from another email vendor to us, is most email vendors are is sort of that it's you whitelist domains that you allow to come in, so it's very restrictive, and you're opening up domains, so they're already providing that protection for you, that by the time it comes to us, it's already been cleaned. So it doesn't really affect you when these whitelisted domains are there. But when you migrate from them to us, you have to make sure that the underlying plumbing, the configuration is done properly to ensure that the EOP and ATP are working at the best, working as effectively as they can. Because if you whitelist a domain, if you look right here, it's going to bypass several layers of protection within Exchange Online Protection. It can't do its job because you're saying you want to whitelist a domain. So you're allowing it to flow through, right? So if an adversary literally spoofs as a domain and they send it to you, your policy says, let it through. I whitelisted it, and it's allowed through. So even if it has improper DKIM, SPF, or DMARC, it still comes through. You shouldn't see any domains in here. You may have a few, I guess, but for the most part, you shouldn't see any domains here. High confidence of spam action. Change high confidence spam action to quarantine message. That means that I have it moved to junk. if there's a high degree of spam, if we think it's a pretty high chance that it's spam, let's go ahead and move it to quarantine instead of junk. Let's not even allow the recipient to go into their junk folder and open it. Let's just go ahead and quarantine it. End user spam notification. That means that enable end user spam notification and set the frequency to 3 days, meaning that whenever they get a spam notification, you want to set it to 3 days. I have it as false. I don't have any spam notification. So it'll be interesting to turn that on. But I actually have a lot of misconfigured settings in my environment just because for me to demo, I want to show certain things. So you're going to see a lot of weird things. And yeah, my environment's configured pretty badly, purposely. High confidence phish action. That means it is recommended to configure high confidence phish detection action to quarantine messages. So if there's a high confidence, it's a phish, quarantine, right? I'm moving it to junk. That's not recommended. Advanced spam filter. I would say turn these on. It actually says currently deprecated. It is recommended to disable advanced spam filters. I would think that these particular numeric IPs, like a numeric IP in a email, right? Remove that. Redirect other ports. Scripted HTML. I wonder why it's recommended not to turn it on. We'll probably have to look at it and see what and see why it's and why it's recommended disabled. There's probably a reason why. Change phish action to quarantine. It is recommended to configure phish detection action to quarantine so that emails are not visible to the end user from within Outlook. So if there's a phish action, right, we want to quarantine that particular email. Instead of allowing them to junk, we move it to quarantine. Safety tips enabled. This looks good. These are basically tips that show up in the email to help the user understand if there's something to be cautious about in the email. So you want to always make sure that's turned on. I don't see why you would turn it off. Maybe you have a lot of messages in your environment, but this is always recommended. Spam action, set to move message to junk mail folder or quarantine. I have it moved to junk mail. Right, typical spam, move it to junk. Bulk action, also, we want to move it to junk. Outbound spam filter policy settings. These are kind of numbers or thresholds. I didn't really mess with it, so I'm passing, but if your organization is not meeting these or have something configured differently, maybe you might want to evaluate it and see if it's within these recommendations. And again, these are recommendations. Every organization is different. You don't have to adhere to it as long as you are aware that you're not meeting it or you're aware why it's set that way. If you are aware, then you can have your organization, it may not always adhere to the recommendations, but you at least know from the support. Mark bulk as spam. So, mark bulk as spam. It sounds pretty straightforward. Bulk complaint level. This is kind of tuning what they consider bulk. So you can make it more strict or more loose, and depending on that number you set, would control the amount of email flowing in that are considered bulk. IP allow list. This is whitelisting specific IP addresses to send emails from that IP into your organization. An example is, let's say there's a server admin that builds a server. He configures SMTP. He sends email. It's not coming in because he's being blocked. If you allow him here, he will be a whitelisted. But that shouldn't be the way you allow him in. You should add him to the SPF record, or have him sign the email with a DKIM signature or some other method, and not leverage this. Allowed senders. Emails coming from senders are not being whitelisted in this unsafe manners. Oh, so if you're allowing a sender to come in, kind of like domain, if you're whitelisting a certain sender, again, it's going to bypass protection. So you don't want to have anything here, unless you're sure about that, or you're sure that the adversary won't identify it. Because the adversary could be mining your configurations, identifying where your gaps are, and leveraging that to his advantage. Quarantine retention period. So what does this mean? Quarantine retention period is allowed to quarantine for 30 days. So that means we will retain the emails or whatever what was quarantined for up to 30 days. Safe link tracking. So I recommend to turn this on. The reason you want to turn this on is because here's an example. If you are aware, there's certain components or bots working within Office 365 to automatically remediate your environment. And an example would be if there is a email coming into your organization, but it wasn't bad, right? Let's say the adversary, it was pointing to a legitimate site and it's not really bad yet, but then the adversary flips a bit, it becomes malicious or whatever, and now it's a bad site. We want to understand, did any users visit this site in the past? And if they did, we want to, purge those emails, because historically they did, but we wouldn't have any information if you didn't track the clicks. If you didn't track the clicks and you turn it off, then we wouldn't really have the visibility to, give that information to the bot to go remediate, because we wouldn't have the information. So that would be possibly an area an unknown that you might not know about, and you would have to manually go find, emails that match a URL with some kind of query. Safe link policy rules. Did you apply to every domain? So it's just really saying, did you apply safe links to all your domains? Unusual character safety tip. If there's an unusual character, turn it on. This is a recipient where the sender name and email address contains character sets that aren't usually used together. Safe link whitelisting. This is if you're whitelisting safe links or safe attachments using an ETR rule, which I did. It'll tell you that's not really recommended. I'm doing it for demo purposes so I can bypass ATP and show the difference between one that doesn't have it and one that has it. But you should never have any kind of bypass policy, because adversary would know about it and then use it to their advantage. Domain impersonation action. So what is domain impersonation? I'm going to show you a simple way to do this. So exactly like this has right here, we have organization. We then have organization with a 0. Organization with a 0, maybe a L instead of an I. Maybe let me do an L like that. Yeah. So you see, it closely resembles the domain, but doesn't really match it. Do you have protections to catch that? If you don't, domain impersonation you will want to turn on. And what that does is, if there's an email that comes from maybe a domain that the adversary might have purchased that looks similar to yours, and you don't have this protection, then the recipient, which may be that low-hanging fruit, would not be able to say, that O is a 0 instead, and then not click on the email. He or she may not pay attention, receive the email, and they might click on it. So this is surfacing those type of campaigns, those type of threats. Safe attachment whitelisting. Again, I have mail flow rules to bypass safe attachments. We don't want to do that. Enable similar user safety tips so that users can receive visible indication of incoming messages. So Office 365 ATP can show warning tips to recipients and messages that might be from impersonation. So when you configure the anti-phishing policy, you can enable the safety tips, and then that way the user gets a little safety tip notification. For user impersonation, it's similar to domain impersonation, except it's an adversary impersonating a user in your organization coming from another email address. So the first name and last name matches, but the email may be different, right? So it could be coming from a Gmail even, or a personal email. But if the first name and last name matches someone in your organization and that user is protected by this policy, then that wouldn't be able to happen. Remove whitelist on senders in anti-phishing policies. So what does that mean? Depending on organization, but we recommend adding users that incorrectly get marked as phish due to impersonation only and not other filters. So, this is interesting. So my organization has my name, Jing Nick, in that organization, and me sending email from Microsoft to the organization, I was actually marked as anti-phishing. So I whitelisted myself so I can send emails to myself. Do not let users click through safe links. Allow click-through. Do not allow click-through. So this is basically allowing them to click through the safe links. It is possible to allow users to click through safe links to original URL. It is recommended to configure safe link policy to not let users click through safe links. So we should always allow users to not when you get a safe links and you in the the website is considered bad, you shouldn't allow a user to click through unless you really trust that they can vet the site. So do you want to allow them to click through or not? That's basically what it says. Mailbox intelligence is really building an understanding on when the email is sent from within your organization to other people and building understanding. They may have the same first name and last name, so this is kind of building understanding within the organization. This intelligence is building that understanding. So when an email does come in from a user outside the organization that maybe might resemble someone within your organization, it wouldn't raise this alert. So it kind of removes all those false positives. Anti-phishing threshold level. Again, you want to adjust that level. You don't want to, if you set it really high, it's going to be too strict. A lot of emails might not come in. So you want to kind of manage this level based on your environment and how kind of emails come in. Safe attachment policy rules. Does it apply to all the domains? Similar domain safety tips. So if it's a similar domain, do you want a safety tip? Mailbox intelligence protection. Do you want to turn it on? Change mailbox intelligence based on protection action to move messages to junk folder. It's just basically is if there's any kind of if the mailbox intelligence determines that it may be a impersonation, to move it to a junk folder. I have no action right now, so be good to configure that. Set safe attachment unknown malware responses to block message. So right now I have dynamic delivery. Dynamic delivery means that there's different options you can take with safe attachments. You can choose to deliver the message after it's been scanned. You can choose to not deliver the message and just block it or allow it based on the results. You can also choose to deliver the message, but the contents of the attachment is not available until it's done being scanned. So they'll receive the email, but then we'll replace the contents with the actual attachment when we have vetted it with safe attachments. So different user experience on each one. Depending on your organization, you will want to choose one or the other. Anti-phishing rules. Let me see. Each domain has an anti-phishing policy applied to it, or the default policy is being used. So does each domain have anti-phishing applied to it or not? Anti-phishing trusted domains. Again, you don't want to whitelist domains from a policy unless you have to. Try to leverage other protections, but it's understandable. Some organizations might not have proper DKIM, SPF, or DMARC, so you may have to whitelist the domain, or maybe just figure out how to whitelist their sending servers they're sending on behalf of. Maybe find out that. Anti-spoof protection action. So if there is a spoofing protection, I guess it triggers, move the messages to a junk folder. So it looks like I have that turned on. Action for unknown potentially malicious URL. So if SafeLinks has determined the URL to be malicious, kind of, then we want to take action on it, and then we want to make sure that is enabled. SafeLinks synchronous URL detection. This is kind of similar to safe attachments, where you want to wait till the URL is vetted before the email comes in. So you want to wait for the email, the URLs to be scanned, and then forward the email through to the recipient. Unauthenticated sender. I don't really know much about this. It seems to tag the email if it determines the email to not be authenticated or not from the actual source. So if it doesn't pass SPF, DMARC, or DKIM, it's tagged as unauthenticated. Maybe, I guess you could use this in the mail flow transport rule or something. I'll have to kind of look into this, but it has to do something with when the sender is not vetted properly, or but it doesn't pass a certain checks. It's marked as unauthenticated with some form of tag. Intra-organization safe link. So a lot of email protection vendors won't have protections within internal to your organization. So an example would be a email coming into your organization. Maybe the user is compromised somehow, and when the user is compromised, he's making lateral movements within your organization and trying to infect other email boxes and those users. The reason is because a privileged user doesn't always have to be an admin. It could be a accountant that has access to make transfers or bank wires. So if I was to make lateral movements within the organization, I could possibly be bypassing your email protection. So this is disabling or enabling that. So we can provide protections within the email to email and email sent with it internally, because it doesn't have to flow back out to get mitigated. Anti-spoofing protection. So you want to turn that on if they spoof a header or something like that. You want to have that protection just by turned on. I don't see why you would have that turned off. The same level of protection we have for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. We provide that same level of protection for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. So the file detonation we're doing, we're also doing that for these other repositories. So by if you do have Office 365 ATP, there's a little check mark, and you can turn it on, and then we can do the detonation for your other environments. So we can protect those areas as well. Also, we will provide protection with the Office documents. So, if it's the link protection and anything like that, within the Office document, we can provide link protection for those. DKIM. If you're not familiar with DKIM is basically signing the emails when they leave your organization, so that if you do get an email inbound and it hasn't been signed, then it fails DKIM. And DKIM might be a parameter to help us understand if it's a illegitimate email or not. So having proper DKIM, SPF, or DMARC is very important to achieve a good security posture when it comes to Office 365. So make sure that's configured. We have protection mechanisms that kind of we kind of have workarounds, but you always want to have this regardless. and having that and vetting these as well. It also helps other organizations receiving emails from you that if it doesn't pass it, they know that it didn't pass certain checks. So not only does it help you, it helps other organizations because it's signed. DNS records. So DNS records have been set up to support DKIM. Do you have that set up? Right? Do you have that set up in your organization? Do you want to block certain file types? EXEs, zips, like do you want to block that? External sender notification. So this is kind of interesting. So we have enable external sender notification. We have it as false. And so if you enable it, adversaries can leverage that to understand if their stuff is making it through or not. You think about it from an adversary's point of view, if I could send an email and you catch it, then it's a good way for me to test and test and test until I find one that doesn't break through. So maybe turning this off is something that they recommend. So similarly, if it's internal to internal emails, maybe turn those off so that the adversary could also not leverage that information. Domain whitelisting. Domains are not being whitelisted in an unsafe manner. So this just really checks if you had a proper configured. So we look good there. Zero auto purge enable for spam. So what this means is if we see something bad, a bad attachment, do you want us to go ahead and remove it across your whole organization that also match that bad hash or the similar file? Do you want, if you don't want us to, then you want to disable this. But I don't see why, if we've determined something to be bad, you don't want us to delete it. But every organization is different. So but this is something we recommend to turn on so that you can have like automatic remediation. Support filter policy action. Supported filter policy action. Blah, blah, blah. It requires a supported action in this spam filter policy. Okay, this is removing false. So a false negative is an email that we thought was good and it's actually bad. So it'll be interesting. So supported filter policy action. I might have to look into that. I don't really know. It seems like we can leverage zero auto purge to assist removing emails we thought were good and remove those. So I would just look into the documentation and find out more information about that. Zero auto purge enable for malware. So we want to, if we see anything that's a malware, we want to go purge it everywhere else that's also determined as a malware. And it also works, in the other, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams as well. Zero auto purge enable for phishing campaigns, and you want to turn on audit logging. So a lot of good stuff. Hopefully this was able to help you get an idea on understanding your Office 365 environment. Hopefully you understand how to, when you're trying to configure the environment, always keep in the back of your mind what's best for your organization, and always make sure to, certain configurations we recommend might not apply to your organization. Maybe you might feel that you may set it another way, but again, you're just using this. This is just really surfacing what's configured and bring it to your attention, and then you can do what you will with it. But this is just some more information for you that for you to assess your environment. So hopefully this was able to help you. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment or reach out. Thank you, everyone.